Picture this. You've just started a promising conversation. Things are going well. Then, poof, silence. You glance around, they look at their shoes. It's the dreaded awkward silence. You feel a pressure to fill the void, but your mind is completely blank. How do you keep the conversation alive after the initial pleasantries? What if you feel like you've exhausted all your topics? How do you transition smoothly between subjects without it feeling forced? And how on earth do you avoid that uncomfortable silence altogether? These are universal conversation struggles. And if you've ever felt this way, you are absolutely not alone. Today, we're going to banish those awkward silences forever and learn how to keep any conversation flowing naturally, making you a memorable and engaging communicator. Hey everyone, and welcome back to SoftSkills Speak. Unlock your communication potential. In our last 2 videos, we've mastered making incredible first impressions and confidently starting conversations. But what happens after hello? What do you do when the initial buzz fades and that dreaded silence starts to creep in? I remember a few years ago, I was at a bustling networking event. I'd just successfully used my new conversation starting skills, thanks to our last video, and connected with a senior professional whose work I deeply admired. We talked about the event, the weather, the initial small talk, and then a pause. My heart started to race. My mind screamed, "Say something, anything." But for a moment, I froze. This was my chance to learn from them. But how do I keep it going? Thankfully, I remembered a core principle: active listening is your superpower. Most of us listen to reply, not to understand. Active listening means truly focusing on what the other person is saying, not just the words, but the emotions, the underlying meaning. When they spoke, I forced myself to listen for hooks. A hook is a keyword or idea they mention that you can use to ask a follow-up question. So, when they mentioned, "I'm really excited about the new project focusing on community outreach," that was my hook. This brings us to our first key activity, the active listener's loop. Listen for keywords hooks. What specific words or topics did they mention? Ask a follow-up question. Use those keywords to ask an open-ended question. Remember those from our last video? If not, check out the link above. Instead of just, "Oh, that's interesting," I asked, "That sounds fascinating. What kind of community outreach are you envisioning for this new project?" Listen again. Their answer will give you new hooks. They lit up. They started talking about connecting with local schools, mentoring programs, and the challenges of funding. Suddenly, we weren't talking about the weather anymore. We were talking about their passion. But what if the hooks dry up? Or you want to gracefully shift topics? That's where bridges come in. Sometimes, you'll need to pivot the conversation. You don't just jump from community outreach to "what's your favorite food?" You find a bridge. The Ford method: revisit and expand. This is fantastic for finding new, safe topics. Family. Speaking of community, do you have family in this area? Occupation. Your work in outreach sounds incredibly rewarding. What initially drew you to this field? Recreation. With all that community work, how do you unwind? Any hobbies? Dreams. What's one big goal you hope to achieve with this project in the next 5 years? The relatable anecdote bridge. Share a short, relevant personal story. That reminds me of a time when I volunteered at. With this professional, I used the occupation bridge. I said, "It sounds incredibly rewarding. What initially drew you to this specific area of community engagement?" This opened up a whole new facet of our conversation, and we ended up discussing career paths and purpose. So, let's revisit those nagging questions about keeping conversations flowing. How do you keep the conversation alive after the initial pleasantries? Answer: by becoming an active listener. Always listen for hooks, keywords or ideas, and use them to ask open-ended follow-up questions. What if you feel like you've exhausted all your topics? Answer: build bridges between topics. Use frameworks like the Ford method, family, occupation, recreation, dreams, or share a short, relevant anecdote to introduce a new, related thread. How do you transition smoothly between subjects without it feeling forced? Answer: use those bridges. Don't jump. Connect. A simple "that reminds me of," or "speaking of," can gracefully shift gears. And how on earth do you avoid that uncomfortable silence altogether? Answer: by proactively using active listening and having a mental toolbox of open-ended questions and bridging techniques. The more you practice, the less silence you'll encounter, because you'll always have a way to re-engage. Remember, even a short, comfortable pause is natural. It's the awkward, empty silence we're banishing. Keeping conversations flowing is a beautiful dance of listening, asking, and sharing. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room, but about being the most engaging. And like any dance, it gets easier and more graceful with practice. Your challenge this week: in your next conversation, try to identify 3 hooks and ask 3 open-ended follow-up questions. See how much longer and deeper your conversations become. If you're ready to transform your communication skills, please give this video a thumbs up. And definitely subscribe to SoftSkills Speak for more practical soft skills and communication training every week. What's a conversation killer you've experienced? Or a tip you use to keep things flowing? Share in the comments below. Next time, we'll explore how to end conversations gracefully and make a lasting final impression. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on SoftSkills Speak.